Good to see you all. And good to see those, or at least looking through the black screen at you and Facebook and YouTube. Glad that you're in the space with us as well this morning. And we are sending up a prayer to the gods of caffeine and green tea to make sure that the energy is strong and vibrant here. I'm doing a double service, so I was up extra early this morning. So if you're in the neighborhood, you can join us for the 10:30 as well. So happy to substitute for Reverend Jude on that front. And as we come here this morning, we're, as usual, coming into a space where we can find that peace that is found only within. And that means that we begin to look at our life very differently than we've been conditioned to see it. All of us start out as, people in the world trying to make their way in the world. And that is a very vast range of how all of that can look. Some of us are having an easier time than others. Some have had, a downhill, very nice meandering way through life. Others a struggle from day one. But all of that is a way of bringing us to this moment where we can make an informed and conscious choice to be more than our conditioning, to be more than the person that we thought we were in the world, whether that was an easy or a good life or one that was full of trauma and struggle. And so we are coming to a place within this service where the possibility of true freedom is being offered, freedom from the conditioned mind, freedom from the roles that we've assigned to ourselves and the roles that we've assigned to others. Because as we're going to look today, we really actually suffer not because of what's going on in life necessarily. We oftentimes suffer because of our beliefs, because of the ideas we have, the expectations that we have. And when life doesn't go according to our expectations and our plans, we begin to feel very upset about that, or we begin to inflict a lot of discontent upon ourselves, and that oftentimes spills out into other relationships. And we begin to actually create chaos and create problems in our life because we have this deep gnawing dissatisfaction within our own experience of life. And actually that dissatisfaction, if we were to skip over to Buddhism for a moment, is actually the root cause of suffering. That we are not satisfied. And Buddha is saying that we're not satisfied because we have these desires based on our plans, what we want, what we expect, what should happen, what people should do. And when we have our way of going about in the world completely settled as to this has to happen or I'm not going to be happy, we are setting ourselves up for a major disappointment. So the Buddha is saying you can actually be free of that, free of suffering, by coming to a place of stopping all of your planning and beginning to discover something deeper than your own conditioned mind. And this is what we're up to this morning, looking beyond our beliefs, beyond our ideas, and into the heart of the unconditioned, undiscovered self. So before we do that, we'd just like to set the stage by allowing the mind to settle onto the breath, quiet, bring our attention from the outer world of distraction to the inner world. And let's have a shared commitment to actually stop. Stop the paying attention to the mental chatter. Stop distracting ourselves from just being present and witnessing this moment. just feel for a moment that deeper silence of just witnessing. And so what's fascinating about the teachings that we explore on a Sunday is that you are eternally the witness, that your awareness is awareness, and that is its nature. It's never not aware. What it is aware of is depending on where you bring your concentration and your focus. So if we're aware of our beliefs, our ideas, the identity of the body, our awareness gets mingled or mixed or confused with perishable things, things that come and go, things that go up and down like our emotional states, things that are not constant, not sure, not peaceful and quiet. And so our awareness is awareness, but it then becomes identified with things that create a block in awareness. And this actually disturbs our peace because we begin to lose sight of who we are. And so the whole point of coming back to an enlightened state of awareness is really just to know who you are. It's to discover this undiscovered self. And so we want to recognize that what this will then require is a shedding of the conditioning, a shedding of the old ways of being. This is vital if you want peace. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today is letting go or discarding or loosing things that no longer serve us. And so this is going to start our conversation off today. It's Mark Nepo's The Book of Awakening. Not sure if you're aware of this. It's Having the Life You Want by Being Present to the Life You Have. Nice little subtitle there. And it's a 365-day little reminder here. So this is the entry for March 28th. And it's entitled The Gift of Shedding. From the beginning, the key to renewal has been the casting off of old skin. And then he elaborates here. It is interesting that the earliest peoples believed in something that we are, in our modern hive of manufacturing, what we have forgotten, that immortality is attainable by shedding. The Dusons of North Borneo have believed for centuries that when God finished creating the world, he announced that whoever is able to cast off his skin shall not die. But what does this mean? Not that we can live forever, but that the way to stay closest to the pulse of life, the way to stay in the presence of that divine reality which informs us, which informs everything, is to be willing to change. Still, he says, change what? To change whatever has ceased to function within us, to shed whatever we are carrying that is no longer alive, to cast off our dead skin because dead skin can't feel. Dead eyes can't see. Dead ears can't hear. And without feeling, there is no chance of wholeness. And wholeness remains our best chance to survive the pain of breaking. Of course, he says, for human beings, dead skin takes many forms, the most significant of which remain intangible but suffocating, such as a dead way of thinking, a dead way of seeing, a dead way of relating, a dead way of believing, or a dead way of experiencing. In essence, concluding here, in essence, shedding opens us to self-transformation. Paradoxically, those of us who refuse such renewal will sooner or later be forced to undergo transformation anyway, as a result of being broken or eroded by the world. Very often, both occur at the same time. That is, we shed from within while being eroded from without. So then he gives us a little bit of a meditation idea here as we continue in our conversation together. He invites us to center ourselves and meditate on what we are carrying in our life right now that is dead skin, that's holding us back from growth, holding us back from renewal, transformation. And then finally, breathe cleanly and deeply and ask yourself, what are you being called to shed, to put to rest, in order to gain greater access to the hidden wholeness of life? So part of this renewal, this bringing in what will, have us grow and feel joy, is letting go of the things that are blocking us from having joy. And much of the time, he was saying, it's the way that we think, it's the way that we believe. And so the idea that we think we know what's going on out there in the world is actually, according to this, a way of looking at something that is dead and gone. What we want to recognize in what these teachings bring out is we are asleep in a state of ignorance until we come to recognize the one self in all beings. And until we recognize the one self in all beings, our world and this idea that we have of being in the world is much more akin to a dream or a hallucination, say these teachings. And so one of the things that we come to realize as we let go of these dead ideas is that we didn't really know anything to begin with. We only thought we did. We had this very unsure knowledge. And if you really look at everything that you're resting your life on, it's a very cloudy, indirect kind of an experience. It's not sure. It's not certain. And that even goes for how you think about yourself, right? If you were to define yourself, really look at what makes you you, it's really resting on shifting and changing opinions and ideas. Like if you were to go back 30 years ago and define yourself as you thought yourself back there, and then look here, chances are if you've been growing and evolving, that's definitely not who you think you are now. That has changed. You've, given up a lot. You've shed a lot of these identity patterns and beliefs. Well, that continues. And according to these teachings, you could speed that up to the point where you can come to this moment completely free, right? We can shed everything that's dead in the here and now and get a real taste of who we are, beyond conditioning, beyond ideas. Because remember, the one listening, the one witnessing this moment is what you're really looking for. We just keep distracting away from it. So in the teachings of yoga, which is really just a really deep psychology, they have 5 states of consciousness that I think will help us on this journey of understanding this morning. These 5 states of consciousness, they start off with this distracted mind, right? Kshipta. This distracted mind is always racing around, jumping from one thought to the next, a monkey mind. And that monkey mind is always on the go, always doing, always looking for the next thing to involve itself with. This emotion, that thought, that memory, that image, this chore, that task, that event, whatever it is, it's always next in line, never still. And then you get to a point where you exhaust yourself in that state of mind. And so the other state of mind that complements that state of mind is mudha, is laziness, is kind of getting into a place of torpor or total relaxation. So we go from these two states of mind back and forth, keep toggling from heaviness and laziness back into activity and frenetic behavior. And according to the yoga science, you'll never know yourself, your deeper self, your true self. You'll never get beyond your conditioning as long as you exist within these two states of mind, looking for the stimulus and excitement and joy and happiness of the body, and then being totally exhausted and numbed out. You have to go to that next state of mind, he says, where you begin to ask the question, like, what's life all about? Who am I? What's truth? What is this self beyond the conditioning? And that question begins to bring your attention beyond the conditioning. And so you'll find, if you're sitting here or listening this morning, you go into this place of what they call in this yoga psychology, vikshepa, where you begin to oscillate or go back and forth between being in this distracted or lazy way of being to then being in a place where you want to know, you want to wake up, you want peace, you want truth, you want to, be in a state of divine presence. And so there is, for a while, this tug of war going back and forth. And if you stay the course, you begin to build an inner muscle and you begin to cultivate virtue, an inner resolve, right? Now keep in mind, really important to get, cultivating virtue and building this inner energy of focus is what's going to get you to the next stage. But what you're also going to find in this tug of war that you're in is that the old habits, the old ways, the old beliefs, the old pleasures, the old traumas, they're going to pull you back. And if you start getting pulled back into those old ways of being, sometimes you go and, get in the mud again. Or you'll get into a toxic relationship again. Like just when you were making strides, almost on cue, you bring somebody into your movie. I've done this, years and years ago, that will then take you way out. And then you got to find your way back over time, after being broken, after being eroded, after shedding. But the idea is to have wisdom and see that, so here's the invitation to get pulled back into this cycle of drama and distraction. And do I want that? Right? What do I value more? Growing or staying stuck in my old patterns? And so it's not always easy. It's not always smooth sailing. You're sometimes going to, rack your brain and feel really upset or really unsettled, right? When you're working through some of these deep patterns and conditioned ways of being, it's not always going to be smooth. Challenge can be really strong. But eventually, if you stay the course, and not only that, but when you've made that choice to wake up, you have invisible help. You're always being aided from beyond where you think you are. Because what you're waking up to is calling you home. So grace will begin to enter your life more and more. As you begin to open to it, you'll feel the influence of grace. And so that will oftentimes be the deciding factor of whether you're going back into the swamp or whether you're going into the sunlit path, is opening to grace. If you think you're on your own and you're doing it yourself, this can be a very difficult and long road. But eventually you get to a place where you've made up your mind so vigilantly that you get to that next state of consciousness, as they describe it in the yoga science. And that is, you become one-pointed, ekaggata. Your mind becomes so focused and so intent on waking up and knowing who you really are and seeing that one self in all beings, that you are not willing to deviate from that at all. And what really makes that a solid focus oftentimes is that when you do deviate, you begin to see more and more how painful it is. Right? As they say in yoga, and I don't mean just the physical practice of yoga, that's the asana practice of yoga. Yoga is a vast subject matter. It includes the body, mind, and spirit. But the general tone of this yoga science, as they say, is when you're waking up in your consciousness, you're becoming increasingly more sensitive, right? You're getting out of that mud or mudha state of being dark and thick-headed and lazy and stubborn and immovable and rigid, right? When you're like that, you don't feel anything. But as you begin to evolve and open your consciousness, you become very sensitive to everything and everyone. You actually start to feel everything very intensely. And so they say it like this: when you get a particle of dust on your skin, let's say on your arm, you know, when you're in that lower vibration of consciousness, you don't feel it at all. It could be, you know, a mosquito or anything else like that on your skin. And maybe somebody else comes along and says, oh, you got a mosquito on your arm. When you're brightening and intensifying your connection to God, your consciousness becomes as sensitive as an eyeball, they say. So if you get a bug in your eye, you immediately know it, and you're going to get it out. And so this idea of becoming one-pointed, even the slightest deviation into illusion, or going back into the old pattern, becomes increasingly more turbulent and disturbing. And you don't want to delay anymore, because you realize going into God consciousness is the only joy. You can't find joy in the world, in the objects, in the bodies, right? It just becomes clearer and clearer as you go along, right? So that's the idea of shedding these old ideas, right? Because if we keep these old ideas around, as he said, they're dead. It's like dead skin. And we can't feel the pulse of life. And we're not aware of all the blessings, all the opportunities that can come and are coming to us. Right? So speaking of the yoga science, this is Vashishta's yoga. It's one of the great scriptures of yoga from ancient India. And it's full of really amazing stories and teachings. Just a quick background. Vashishta is a sage, a rishi, a seer that lived thousands of years ago, and he was a celestial being that came to earth with the express purpose of helping mankind evolve back into their true self. And so he's considered what is called in this teaching a mind-born son of Brahma, the creator. So he was awakened, he was enlightened from his inception. He never lost connection. Comes into this earth, and his whole dialogue in the Yoga Vashishta is with Rama. Rama, you may know from ancient India, you've heard Ram, Ram, Ram is one of the major mantras of India. Rama is an incarnation of Vishnu, or God. And this is Rama in the story at 16. And so he's being given instruction by Vashishta on the nature of the self. And what's interesting about the way the Yoga Vashishta starts out, it starts out with Rama recognizing that joy, happiness, peace cannot be found in the world. He comes to that realization, and that makes him ripe and ready for the teaching. He's broken open. Without that breaking open, like we said last week, the mind can't receive the teaching. You know, the illustration that we gave last week is when your mind is still addicted to the world and thinking that you can find happiness and satisfaction in the world, it's like a hot burner, right? It's full of passion and searching and distracting energy. And the teaching of truth is like a drop of water on that hot burner. And so if you're sitting here, there's a part of you, remember, you're probably in that tug of war. There's a part of you that still wants to be in the world, still thinks there's something there in bodies and things and objects that's going to get you what you want. But there's a part of you sitting here that took you here that knows that's not true. And so there's a tug of war. But what happens is like that old Native American story, the two wolves fighting, and the young grandson says, you know, Papa, which wolf will win? And the granddad says, the one you feed. So if your mind is bent on staying in the world, you'll get this teaching, but like that drop of water on a hot burner, it's going to fizzle away before you get it in your car. You'll forget all about this. It's kind of, I don't know if you remember that first Matrix movie. When Neo meets the Oracle, and she gives him the cookie, and basically says, you know already. I don't need to tell you anything, and you're right, and you're sure of yourself, and everything's going to be okay, just the way you think. And of course, it wasn't going to be that, but Neo wasn't ready for the teaching. And so there's nothing that the enlightened teacher can give when the student isn't ready, right? So Rama's ready. Rama recognizes that the world is a hopeless place, right? Doesn't mean that the world won't be transformed into something beautiful, but it's only when you discover who you really are. Because the world is yourself. And if you don't know yourself and you think you're the body, the world is empty. That's what the image they keep giving you. It's a hallucination. It's a mirage. You're trying to find yourself in the objects and people of the world. And it's like trying to drink water from a mirage. There's no substance. It never satisfies you. So the idea then is to recognize it for the hallucination that it is and wake up. And be full, be happy, be you. And then you can celebrate this in the world and recognize it everywhere. The world becomes a place of celebration. Okay. Must have moved my forgive me. Here we are. So this is a story, and I think you'll find it amusing. It's called The Story of the Three Non-Existent Princes. Okay? So Vashishta tells Rama this story. And he says first, "O Rama, the mind in a state of ignorance imagines bondage. The bondage exists only in that state of ignorance, just as the dream objects vanish when the dreamer wakes up. All these hallucinations known as bondage and liberation do not exist in the eyes of the enlightened. To illustrate this, there is an interesting legend. Kindly listen to it. A young boy asked his nanny to tell him a story, and the nanny told him the following story, to which the boy listened with great attention. Once upon a time, in a city which did not exist, there were 3 princes who were brave and happy. Of them, 2 were unborn, and the 3rd was not conceived. Unfortunately, all their relatives died. The princes left their native city to go elsewhere. Very soon they fell into a swoon, unable to bear the heat of the sun. Their feet were burnt by the hot sand. The tips of grass pierced them. They reached the shade of 3 trees, of which 2 did not exist, and the 3rd was not even planted. After resting there for some time and eating the fruits of those trees, they proceeded further. They reached the banks of 3 rivers. Of them, 2 were dry, and in the 3rd there was no water. The princes had a refreshing bath and quenched their thirst in them. They then reached a huge city, which was about to be built. Entering it, they found 3 palaces of exceeding beauty. Of them, 2 had not been built at all, and the 3rd had no walls. They entered the palaces and found 3 golden plates. 2 of them had been broken into 2, and the 3rd had been pulverized. They took hold of the one which had been pulverized. They took 99 minus 100 grams of rice and cooked it. They then invited 3 holy men to be their guests. Of them, 2 had no body, and the 3rd had no mouth. After these holy men had eaten the food, the 3 princes partook of the rest of the food cooked. They were greatly pleased. Thus they lived in that city for a long, long time, in peace and joy. My child, this is an extremely beautiful legend. Pray, remember this always, and you will grow up to be a very learned person. It's a riddle, yes? What is being shown here, and Vashisha is going to give us more pointers to look at, is how we ascribe reality to things that don't really exist the way we think they do. We never think to question what we consider to be solid and real. By being in this kind of a service on a Sunday morning, you're asked to do just that. You're asked to get out of the habitual state of being excited and lazy, which is the state of ignorance, and you're asked to begin to ask these deeper questions. What is real? What is true? You know, back to the first Matrix movie for some reason. Remember when Neo first got out of that hive of sleepers and he popped out of the Matrix, and now he knew he wasn't that digital self that he thought he was within the construct of the computer-generated illusion? And he said to Morpheus when they were in that construct, what is real? And Morpheus says, Morpheus said that you're in a construct, you're in a computer-generated environment. And Neo's holding on to the back of a chair. And he says to Morpheus, you mean this chair isn't real? And he says, what is real? What you're really thinking is real are electrical signals interpreted by your brain. You're calling that real, and you're giving images to it. What they know of science blows our mind. We're literally imagining the chairs and the floor and the people and the shirt and everything else. It's being hallucinated by these electrical impulses that our brain is interpreting into these images, right? Is this bringing up some old memories of your learning? So on a Sunday morning, you're being asked, just like we were saying, you come out of that conditioned self, out of the construct, and you begin to say, what is real? Who am I? And that will lead you beyond the dream. That will have you begin to really question the world that you've made. And so Vasishta follows with this comment. What is known as the creation of the world is no more real than this story of the young boy. This world is nothing but pure hallucination. It is nothing more than an idea. In the infinite consciousness, the idea of creation arose, and that is what it is. O Rama, this world is nothing more than an idea. All the objects of consciousness in this world are just an idea. Reject the error of ideation and be free of ideas and remain rooted in truth and attain peace. So abandon your old way of seeing. Shed that dead skin, dead ideas, dead beliefs, because they're like a veil. And when you are willing to shed them, the light will come through and shine in your mind, and you'll wake up. He says, we can then rest in this perfect vision. He says, abandon your latent tendencies, right? These conditioned patterns. Abandon them. They're going to come up. They're going to try to pull you back in the world, back into the swamp, back into the mud. And if you're just satisfied with that animal existence of lust and sleep, then you're not going to do anything about it. That hot burner will sizzle it away. But if you really want to know, you're going to begin to have to abandon and struggle with these old tendencies so that they don't pull you back in. He says, abandon your latent tendencies, even as a bird wishing to fly into the sky breaks out of its shell. Right? The very desire to undertake this inquiry will be the starting point that will bring about the change. So that's the importance of stopping, like we said with the Buddha. The idea of stopping brings in the possibility to renew. You're stopping the repetitive embodiment of these old ideas and conditioned patterns. So if we were to go up into the final stage of the yoga states of consciousness, remember we had that frenetic, distracting, lusting energy. We had the lazy energy. Then we had that tug of war energy where you want to wake up, but no, you don't want to wake up, right? Then you get into one-pointedness, and it begins to become increasingly clear that waking up is the only place where you're going to have joy. And then when you get to that fifth stage, it's referred to in the Sanskrit as nirodha. It's stopping, it's ceasing, it's going still, it's quiet. That's when the mind's machinery stops. And when it stops, it becomes like a placid lake. And then the sun, that is your higher self, will shine on your mind. And you'll feel it. And your mind will go into a state of grace. And your whole being will be infused with light, right? As Jesus says in the gospel, make your eye single, ekagra, one-pointed, and your whole body will be filled with light. And then when the mind is enlightened in that state, it can then think and emote and act in the world, but in a way that is free. It's not bound. It's not conditioned. So you don't go into a state of catatonic, unconsciousness. You actually get into a place of self-mastery, where you're no longer pulled into these reactive situations, and you're able to see through the illusions of other people's misperceptions. So you're not going to get hooked, because you've mastered that within yourself. Right? So that's what Buddha actually says is the cure to suffering. That very same word that in the yoga science is at the top of that scale of consciousness. Buddha said, life is dissatisfaction, it's suffering, dukkha. We are suffering because we are lusting from a place of not knowing ourselves. And the only way out of this is to stop that. Nirodha. And then when we stop that, we begin to see that what we thought was our life before was a hallucination. And just like a little child becoming an adult, you won't want to play with those toys anymore. It's just, you're beyond it. So along these lines, Jesus in A Course in Miracles says something quite apropos. What if you recognize this world is a hallucination? What if you really understood you made it up? What if you realized that those who seem to walk about in it, to sin and die, attack and murder, and destroy themselves, are wholly unreal? Could you have faith in what you see if you accepted this? And would you see it if you accepted it, that this world is an illusion that you made up? You wouldn't see that world anymore, because your mind would go still and the light of your higher self would shine in your mind. You won't see that world anymore. You made that up. It was made up from lack of light. It was a picture of a world that lacked light. Just like a desert lacks water, and you see mirages. You don't see mirages in rainforests unless you're taking ayahuasca. Hallucinations disappear when they are recognized for what they are. This is the healing and the remedy. Believe them not, and they are gone. And all you need to do is recognize you did this. Right? Like I said earlier, when you're on this, tug of war stage of waking up, like there's something in you that really wants it, but there's another part of you that gets really pulled back to those conditioned needs and lusts and desires and fears and hang-ups and challenges and dramas, and you find yourself really struggling with that. It would be very helpful in those moments of the struggle if you can stop for a moment, right? Stop. And I did this. I'm doing this. I'm actually bringing these people here to create the struggle so that I don't wake up, because I kind of want not to wake up. So the part of my mind that doesn't want to wake up brings in the opportunities that will bring me into the swamp, delay me, derail me. I'm doing this. They're not doing this. I'm inviting them in to do it. Because secretly, maybe I'm scared to wake up, or I'm not ready to see that I made this hallucination. Maybe I still think that there's something in the world that's going to make me happy. I did this. I'm doing this. I invited them in. It's not them doing it to me. When you can get that, you're no longer hooked. That's why he says, when you can see that the hallucination was put there by you, you can heal. You can't heal if you think other people are doing this or the choice is beyond your control. You're willing to disempower yourself. That's power. That's why he says, one thing is sure, hallucinations serve a purpose. And when that purpose is no longer held or desired, they disappear. Therefore, the question never is whether you want them, but always, do you want the purpose that they serve? Do you want to get pulled back into the hallucination so that you don't know yourself? You don't wake up. You don't regain the light of your own true nature. Do you want to stay in the dark? Hallucinations will serve you. That's what they're for. You put them there to hold yourself back. When you don't want to hold yourself back anymore, you see through them. And you know what? Sitting here right now, thinking of your hallucinations that you use to hold yourself back, I guarantee if you were to look at what you're doing to yourself, you'd see right through it. But then you can go to sleep in the next second. That's what he says. He says we have secret magic wands. And as soon as truth begins to dawn in our mind and we don't want it because it's scary and, to go into your big self and to be your true nature, we immediately wave our secret magic wand. So that's what also happens. It's like, the water on the hot burner. Or if you're sitting here and you're like, wow, that's amazing. Oh my God, I do see the... And then you get back in the car and you're like, oh, okay, that was an interesting service. I don't remember anything that guy just said. So let me get on the phone and start my life again. Right? What will it take for the continuity to follow you out that door and take root in every area of your life? You got to want it. You got to want it more than your hallucinations. So we're on the final leg of our journey here this morning, and it is really where the rubber meets the road now. So if you really want the peace, the joy, the fulfillment, the end of suffering, look at it that way, you'll realize that hallucinations only serve to block you from everything that you truly want. I mean, if you really were to do the litmus test of the things that you feel would promise you satisfaction in life, and maybe they've been around for years and years, and you're still not satisfied. Well, what did Einstein say about insanity? It's doing the same thing again and again, expecting a different result. How many times do we do this? Sometimes with the same setup, the same situation, the same relationship. We repeat it again and again and again, thinking it's going to be a different result. If you haven't changed, if you haven't gotten out of your own conditioning, you're going to repeat the pattern. Because that's your pattern. It's not them. They're there because you want them there so you don't have to change. It's them that has to change. Right? That's what a hallucination does. One of the payoffs of hallucinating is, I'm not doing this. It's the president. It's my partner. It's the banks. I'm not doing this. So the only way out is to recognize you put those hallucinations there for a purpose, so as to not wake up. If you want to wake up, you got to realize you're doing this to yourself. They're not going to change. They're your hallucination, showing you your own ignorance, repeating itself again and again. That's why he says in lesson 132, which is, I loosed the world from all I thought it was. Listen to this opening paragraph. What keeps the world in chains but your beliefs? And what can save the world except your true self? Belief is powerful indeed. The thoughts you hold are mighty, and illusions are as strong in their effects as is the truth. A madman thinks the world he sees is real and doesn't doubt it. Nor can he be swayed by questioning his thoughts' effects, right? Because the effects of his thoughts are the hallucinations, the people, the situations, the events, everything that he thinks of as the outer world. How can you question that? You would have to be mad. She really just said that. And I really need to say this. How can you doubt that? That's why he says, it is but when their source is raised to question that the hope of freedom comes to this madman at last. And that means I have to no longer look at my hallucinations. I have to actually look at my beliefs. What I think about myself. What I think other people should do. The roles that they should play. The roles that I've assigned them to play. You know, many of us struggle from a deep-seated unworthiness. Well, think about it. Life is dissatisfaction, right? Pretty much everyone is dissatisfied. Sometimes the wealthiest people are the most dissatisfied. So it has nothing to do with money. And if you feel dissatisfied ontologically, in your very nature or being, then whether you say it verbally to yourself or not, you still know there's something not right with me, or I would be satisfied. So I'm unworthy of satisfaction. There's something wrong with me, or I would not feel this way. So that deep-seated unworthiness is something that we all carry as separate egos. That's what makes the ego so insecure. And so that insecurity will then make a movie or a hallucination where we assign people into our life to reinforce our deep-seated inferiority or our unworthiness, our insecurity. And we won't doubt it because they do it. We just don't realize we set it up that way. Deep down, because of what we think of ourselves, what we believe about ourselves. That's why he says you can't doubt the madman's world is real to the madman unless you address what's causing it. That's his belief. So there he goes. He says this. Oops. Yet is salvation easily achieved, for anyone is free to change his mind, and all his thoughts change with it. Now the source of thought has shifted, for to change your mind means you have changed the source of all ideas you think, or ever thought, or yet will think. You free the past from what you thought before. You free the future from all ancient thoughts of seeking what you do not want to find. So what's really beautiful about this teaching is if you let go of your past and you open the future to God's guidance, a lot of the times the relationships that you're in, for instance, will shift and become really enjoyable and rewarding. Because now you've taken your agenda off of them. Especially your secret agenda of self-sabotaging. The present now remains the only time. And in the present, you're set free, and the world along with you. He says, for as you let the past be lifted and release the future from your ancient fears, you find escape and give it to the world. Listen to this. You have enslaved the world with all your fears, your doubts and miseries, your pain and tears, and all your sorrows. Press upon it and keep it a prisoner to your beliefs. The world is nothing in itself. Your mind must give it meaning. And what you behold in the world are but your wishes, acted out so that you can look on them and think them real. That's why he says there is no world apart from what you wish. It's hard to fathom this because we still are so caught in the inertia, the gravity of our conditioned self. But what he's saying is, the more you question your belief about who you are, and the more you open to the light of truth and allow it to guide you and release you from your hallucinations, you actually begin to widen your menu of options of what's available for you to experience in the world. What we've done is we've pigeonholed ourselves into a very narrow range of what's possible. And then life keeps repeating in that same usual ordinary way because we think we're the same usual ordinary person. When you begin to melt down your beliefs about who you think you are and allow that higher self to shine, the way that you show up in the world will be completely different, and the world will reflect that. That's why he says, there is no world apart from what you wish. And herein lies your ultimate release. Change but your mind on what you want to see, and all the world must change accordingly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for today. Our blue bag individual, oh, lovely. Bill, you're the best. So the blue bag will go around unexpectedly. And if you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, we ask you to donate through the link, and we thank you for that. Any final thoughts here? Very important.
Especially that piece you said of the fifth phase and the sensitivity, because as for myself, I don't want to judge that I am sensitive or call, put labels on that the culture does of hypervigilant or,
Mm-hmm.
the world doesn't want you to be sensitive. It wants you to be hard and like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a part of us, right? And so we have to give up that hardness in that fight. And then we show up in the world, even if other people stay, difficult or resistant or whatever that looks like, we show up as our true self. That's why we then become very consistent in knowing who we are. That's why he'll say in the Course, teach only love, because that's who you are, no matter what it is. And then love will keep growing in your life, and your relationships will more and more reflect that. And what I find most rewarding is when you have somebody who's really like dug in and negative, and through just that being in love and wanting to bless them, sometimes you'll have that opportunity to watch them undergo their own transformation. And to me, those are like the moments that, you just want to weep with joy because you just saw somebody go from total darkness into love. Very rewarding. Mm-hmm. We'll bless the offering. And we just ask that this offering be charged with the intention that it bring peace and joy and awakening to all who touch it in whatever form that may be. And so it is. Amen. Good. Anybody else? Final thoughts or questions? Okay, let's seal the deal. Just feeling gratitude for all of you. As we rest within the quiet, we come to realize that we are the light of God, and the light of God surrounds us. We are the love of God, and the love of God enfolds us. We are the power of God, and the power of God protects us. We are the presence of God that watches over us. Wherever we go, God is. Amen. Keeping you on your toes. Have a great day, everybody. Course in Miracles tomorrow night, 7:15. Thank you.